Alrighty dighty. Hello everyone. I know I said I was gonna play a game today, but I've had a long 2 weeks, and that's a reason. There's a reason why I not streamed last week, and da da da. It's been a long week, 2 weeks, and I'm not getting into them right now because it's stressful as hell. So point is, I'm fine. It's nothing like that kind of thing. It's just more of just like in general. Um, kind of thing. But yeah, so I'm streaming today as a podcast because I thought it was easier. And you may be wondering, why the hell am I wearing a Spider-Man mask? I decided I had a little epiphany. I was like, okay, well, if I didn't want to really game, what do I want to talk about? And yeah, I thought about talking about Marvel hot takes. This kind of gave me the idea. I got this idea from Gus unintentionally. Uh, he sent me a post. Yesterday on Instagram talking about like this one. I can't remember exactly the details. I probably might find it later if I can look through things. I know it's like, obviously they're messages. Um, but essentially it's this one guy who was talking about how like he hated the Mandarin with Iron Man 3 for the MCU. I should explain that way. He said like how it's not a direct adaptation in the comics. And the other, like, I guess podcast host, whatever you want to call it, pretty much kind of called them out on it, pretty much saying like, well, have you ever actually like read any of the Mandarin comics? And the person said no. And boy, that shut him up quickly, in general. But explaining pretty much the concept of Mandarin was like really interesting and like not like a bad take in the MCU because the way they actually did it, it was the concept that he was saying how like you took a character which was like pretty racist originally in the comics, and took it to actually kind of have a more like interesting character like work. And also again, like they obviously with Shang-Chi they actually found that like they actually brought the actual Mandarin in eventually. But like the whole point with like Travis, like his character, was that like again he was working for like the white man, and like trying to like threaten and make the Middle East look like bad guys, which yeah, that is unfortunately a thing that we do a lot in general. So it was like not a great example. Like I said, if I can find it later, I'll like put it in the description as a link. Because it was like the person in the video just like talked about it really well. He said like yeah, like Iron Man 3 is flawed as like a movie, but like it wasn't the worst. Believe me, I think a lot of people can say and agree. Maybe this is a hot take, I don't know, but like I think Iron Man 2 was the weakest out of the trilogy. So I think yeah, it wasn't like yeah, it was not nothing's to beat Iron Man 1. The first movie is a classic and it's great, but like Iron Man 3 did pretty alright. I will say when I was growing up and I was like a kid, Jesus Christ, thinking about that, I was a kid kind of thing, type of thing. I was like not a kid, but I think I was like a preteen when like I think Iron Man 3 came out. I wasn't a fan of the whole Mandarin thing just because I thought I knew what the Mandarin was type of thing when I was growing up, even though like I only had like small, tiniest, and I mean itty bitty sorts of material, and I was like, what is this? This is not the Mandarin. How dare they? That guy's not even the Mandarin either. And so, like, the whole feeling of rectified when Shang-Chi came out was, like, a thing. But, like, especially now after, like, Wonder Man came out, I think they made it make more sense about, like, the whole Mandarin plot with that. Also, Wonder Man is a good series. And I like that series. I'm not hearing anything bad about it. I don't think it's a hot take. I think people actually like the series, but I'm just saying in general, I like the series a lot. So there is something with that, but like, yeah, they really did make. I think Travis is like a much more sympathetic character throughout just the series in general. I mean, obviously Shang-Chi, they make him very sympathetic of a character in the sense that he was just kind of wrong place, wrong time. He was not doing great. But yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting thing, and so it made me think of like, okay, so like, what are some Marvel hot takes that are out there in the world that exist? And yeah, I decided to do a little bit of lookies. By that I mean I took like 5 minutes for 2 Reddit pages, talking about it. So the first one we'll look into and dive into is the MCU a little bit. Obviously, I mean, in general, it's probably going to come up a lot, the MCU, because that in of itself, I think, is a hot take, I think. Which we'll obviously get into more like exact details of why people think is a hot take about whatever aspects. But yeah, like some people are cool with the MCU and like the MCU, and some people despise it with all their being. And yeah, that's in and of itself, again, could be its own discussion with that. But yeah, so we're gonna look at that. The first one, I also put them in the description if you want to follow along a little bit. But yeah, this one is the Marvel hot takes. What is your biggest hot take that will get you turned into dust if you say it? Can be about anything Marvel. Here's mine. They start off with Marvel should focus more on their animated shows instead of the MCU, which we'll talk about that first because that's a pretty good starting point, I think, in my opinion. Just in general. So that is an interesting point, I think, in general, because I feel like animation and comics are such a perfect harmony. They work so well. They're both drawing mediums, in that regard. So like I do understand that. I will say the more like focused thing, I unfortunately there are people out there who just are not interested in animation. And that sucks because I think animation is just a beautiful and like great art form in general. But I understand that there's some people who just aren't well versed in it, don't get it, whatever. There's so many different reasons why people are not into it. So I feel like you're exploiting a market no matter what. I feel like, and I think in general, animation, like I said, I think animation and comics are just like, again, perfect harmony. They make sense. It's a logical decision. That's just what it is. But I think also when it comes to adaptations, I think the whole point of why live action is so fun and interesting is it's something that you don't see in the real world. It's something that you don't see. These characters don't exist. So seeing them, as real people on quote unquote real people, let's say, on screen is like very magical in a way to see. I think in seeing like Spider-Man like swinging around the city is such a like I was gonna say spectacular, no pun intended, but spectacular thing though. Like it really is like really great and amazing, and it kind of takes something in general from like my dad. We're talking about the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, who Sam Raimi. He remembered being in theaters and watching that movie, and just being like so excited and amazed. This man who's been into comics for such a long time, like literally, he told me one of his first comics was like a Spider-Man comic he found like on the ground on the street, kind of thing. Like that's kind of cool. Like this guy's been into comics for a long time, kind of thing. So like him like really seeing like a proper adaptation on the big screen, live action like that was such a like a breathtaking moment for him. Kind of a thing. And that's a lot of people. I'm not just saying him, but I'm just saying that a lot of people, like, agree with that. I've heard many people talk about that, too, how, like, it was just, like, the most, like amazing, like, thing to just see that, finally. Like, for so long, thinking about, like, this is how would Spider-Man look if he was, like, on, movie screen, and it's, like, it was there. Kind of thing. So, like, there are people who, like, I think, again, I understand animation thing. I will also say, like, I do understand live action, point of it. Kind of a situation. I think both can exist. I think they are trying to balance with both as they can with that. I say be careful with that because there's a weird little. You get into, like, the weird what if kind of category situation where, like, if you don't have an idea what you're doing, it's gonna get weird. But, like, I argue that's the same thing with, like, live action stuff, too. But, yeah. I say both can exist. I understand the animation side of things. Again, someone who loves animation, greatly. But I also understand like the live action standpoint of why that like people want it too. So yeah, we'll shall go on to a a different one. Let's see. I'm gonna have to look through it really quick just to see okay. This one's actually okay. So the next one actually is an interesting one too, because this kind of goes back to what I was sort of touching upon at the beginning. So, not really specific to Marvel, but I do see a lot in the fan base. 95% of people who are mega fans of a character, team, / book tend to project their own ideas / feelings onto that thing to an unreasonable degree, leading them to not accurately understand the thing and the important storylines around it all, because they're so obsessed with that with it being the best. Anything they can't defend or that doesn't fit into their version of the thing is bad writing or editorial's fault. Not that that isn't the case sometimes, but there are some people who can't accept any characterizations, storylines, but the ones they like. So yeah, okay. So from what I gathered from that one is pretty much, yeah, people have like their own idea of a character and own idea of like how they should be written. And if they're not written that way, people are mad, will start riots and stuff like that. I think I see this a lot with the MCU in general. Um Again, going back to that person's kind of point of like the whole Mandarin thing of being like, oh, that's not Mandarin kind of thing. Like a lot of the time I've seen a lot, and I mean a lot of discourse all the time about how they somehow ruin this character because they change like one aspect of it. And yes, sometimes I agree, sometimes they do go the wrong route with these things. I noticed that a lot with the villains. I can't deny that that's still not a thing with that. I mean, MODOK is like I think the biggest example of that I think I can think of on top of my head, where it's like, oh my god, what have you done to like this like popular, like very well versed, like interesting villain in the comics in the MCU, but like the third Ant-Man movie, which is like big, not great. So there is that type of situation. I do get that, and I definitely heavily agree with that, and I definitely think, yeah, there's a lot of fans out there who are justified to a degree with things like that. Like with that, I can agree. There's sometimes though where I think people complain when there's no necessary reason to complain. I'm putting this as the MCU standpoint. I know they were saying in general throughout like the comic base, and not just like obviously not just Marvel. We're talking about like in general, which I think is also another video like Gus sent me about like something related to Batman with that, but not here for that. I feel like it's not right for me to talk about the Batman and like DC stuff with that. So I will just leave it there. But anyway, no. But like honestly, though, there is like sometimes where like some people do have like a weird point about something, with like I think a lot of time. Okay, so this is like something I think a good example of with Kate Bishop is a thing, because I've seen this a lot of the times. Is I got into Kate Bishop because of the MCU. There's an important reason why I'm saying it like this, because a lot of people kind of have complained, and like not in the worst way possible, because some people like who love the comic book version of like Kate Bishop also love the MCU version of her. But I have seen some people who've like complained, being like, oh, I don't like that they changed her, I don't like that they made her a fangirl. Why does she have to be a fangirl? You know, type of thing. That's not what Kate Bishop was in the comics. And it's like, her original backstory in the comics is really dark. Like, it's super dark of like why she became a hero. Like, to kind of go into like a quick summary of that, her original character in the story was that she was part of the Young Avengers, in like the 2000s. I think 2000, like what, 5 it was written, 4, 6, I don't remember. I really need to read more of the original run. But her backstory, the backstory of that was there was a period of time where a lot of the Avengers were dead or missing, kind of a situation. So the world needed a new hero. So there was a bunch of these ragtag group of kids who like kind of were similar to like the Avengers in some capacity that got together. Kate Bishop was very similar to Hawkeye in the sense that she was good at marksman and was able to like, you know, use a bow and arrow and swords like really well, type of thing. Her reasoning why she got into the, you know, martial arts and things like that was one night she was walking in the streets of New York in a park, and she pretty much got assaulted. And it's very messed up. It's very dark, of like kind of a reasoning why she kind of became the hero she is, you know, type of in the comics at least. At least in like the first one. I think they redid her story a little bit, tweaked it to be a little less dark with that. At some point with her always like wanting to be a superhero kind of thing, it wasn't just, you know, that experience that like shaped her completely, but that was her original story. You're gonna go, I mean, again, I understand some people would be like, but realism, and it'd be good to talk about it, and it's like, this was at a time before they started doing stuff with Daredevil and like really just dark themes in general, so like they weren't gonna do that. They just weren't gonna do that. It seemed like the easier and more simpler solution, especially because, again, at some point in the comics, they, again, tweaked her story where, like, she was interested in wanting to be, like, a superhero or wanting to help people. Like, I think that there's a point where, like, she said she wanted to be at S.H.I.E.L.D., and help people with that kind of a thing. But, like, it seemed easier to be like, oh, she was saved by Hawkeye. And that made her be inspired that this guy who could just use a bow and arrow, and still fight all these aliens, can be super cool and be able to help people, and that's what she wanted to do, kind of a thing. Like, I like the concept of it, and I know they kind of switched the rules a little bit of, like, who was, like, the serious person, who was, like, the funny person kind of thing. But, like, they did that, like, way before, that with, like, Clint, because, like, Clint is a hot mess in the comics just in general, and so they kind of made him more, like, just kind of a little bit more stable in the MCU. So it's like they kind of had to do the switch. It's not like you can have two serious people. Like, the whole point is that one of them is, like, kind of a walking disaster a little bit, and, like, that's kind of the whole point. Again, it made me fall in love with the character. It made me get well versed into Kate Bishop and the comics. So it's like there's something out there that way, and I don't think there's nothing wrong with change. But, like, if you're gonna do it, make it make sense. Don't do it for the sake of doing it. I know this is a whole ramble I made for, like, one little point about that, but, like, again, if you're gonna do a change, make it make sense. Do research on the character. Make sure there's something to it. And at least I can say with, like, Kate Bishop, I feel like they did a lot of, like, research about, like, the comics with her. And, of course, Hawkeye in general. So, there's that. And I know a lot of the time people not like Clint either, at least back in the day. But those ones I kind of get, because it's like, oh, every cool character I like, he's, like, got him killed somehow, kind of thing. So, like, I kind of get that, but, like, he's an interesting character, and I like him. So, again, there's the change wasn't, like, just something, like, unnecessary. It was something that they already kind of were, I think, planning in the long run, at least, sort of, with that. If they were going to introduce Kate, she had to be kind of the funny one. So, there is that. But, yeah, I digress. But, yeah. Let's see. This is an interesting one. I cannot answer this one as well, but I can try this one. It's the next one. So, Spider-Man fans don't nearly have it as hard as fans of other characters. I know enough about the Spider-Man thing where, like, it's something I know in general, like, when it comes to other characters in general in the comics, like, I don't know really how they're treated. But, like, I've always heard the topic and discourse of, oh, Spider-Man is treated awfully in the comics. One of, like, the worst, like, characters be, like, written for, like, other people and always have, like, tragic, like, endings and stories and blah, blah, blah. But I think the only reason why it's talked about the most is because Spider-Man is much more, like, of a popular character. I mean, again, that's why I put the mask character for me for that. Like, I love Spider-Man. Don't get me wrong, he's one of my favorite characters too, but, like, my original, like, normal clothes that I have is, like, inspired by Captain America, so, like, that's a different thing entirely. So, like, but, like, Spider-Man is, like, a overreaching character, like, that many people can enjoy, and I think people who, like, get into comics, probably the first comics they probably are going to be reading is Spider-Man. So I can see more of, like, why I think that one's talked about more. I will say, though, man, the character written in the comics a lot of the time has a lot of hardships, and I think the issue kind of comes with, the Brand New Day comics. I think that's kind of where, like, everything started kind of getting into a weird shift with Spider-Man, in the sense that, like, I think people kind of got into this, like, weird thing of, like, oh, Spider-Man needs to be miserable in order to, like, sell, kind of thing. And I think that's where I think it's more of, like, where the fans are more griped by. I don't think it's one of those, like, oh, it's harder for them that, like, they can't enjoy this character. It's like, I think it's more along the lines of sometimes seeing your favorite character miserable gets old. Like, you want the hero to win, man. I think that's kind of the situation I think that I feel with a lot of the Spider-Man fans, is that, like, they want the hero to win, and a lot of the time, Peter Parker, I should say specifically, is kicked down a lot in the comics. Again, I think Brand New Day is, like, the comic that, like, kind of went to that route, and, well, like, yeah, the comic was negatively looked upon. I think a lot of writers looked at it as, like, a, well, the guy isn't wrong, who wrote the comic. I can't for the life of me remember his name right now, but probably for a lot of Spider-Man, he's probably he should who shall not be named type of a situation. So maybe it's for the best. But yeah, it's you know, um, just yeah, like just an interesting like situation to look at because it's like thinking of like again, I'm not really able to answer that as well because it's like I really can't say. I will say though, and this is just me, it is annoying when you like a character like me, like who likes Kate Bishop, and a lot of her comic stuff like gets canceled a lot of the time because she's not the biggest popular character. Like I'm sure someone can put that into things like, well, at least Spider-Man doesn't like have his runs like just canceled mid, like go, type of thing. But like I don't know. I don't think I'm well versed to talk about it, but I can at least understand. I think where the issue I think rises of like, oh, they just want their favorite hero to win, man. Let him win, Let him have something. Let him get the girl and all that, Like I think that's probably where like the issue rises, but I don't know. It could be way deeper than that. So yeah. Um. Okay, this is an interesting one. I think Disney/Marvel should or could make separate movies outside of the main cinematic universe, something like the Warner does with DC Elseworlds. That is, I think, an interesting point. I think that goes into I think the category of what I think about like how DC does like a lot of their animated stuff kind of that way. I think that's where I think a lot of the animation stuff could go to. I think with that is like they can have different movies and things like that yeah aren't related to the universe but like could exist. I know they're dabbling upon it a little bit. I think with like Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Originally, I think it was supposed to be like related to Tom Holland, but I think like rights and issues kind of made it difficult, so they just made it a Spider-Man show that like feels in vein of the MCU, but it's not quite. And I think it's kind of interesting that way, and I think honestly, I think they could do more of that. I think in the future, I think they should. I think it's a good thing. Just kind of get like just other stories out there. Make an emphasis, obviously, that they're not connected to the MCU, but like, you know, I think they can. I think they are wanting to try. I think also bringing back, the X Men from the '90s with X Men '97 is also, I think, where they're wanting to go with that. So like, I definitely see it's a possibility. I think that's again. I think the issue with What If is that they were trying to kind of like connect it to everything with the MCU, and I think it just should have been like exactly what it was, which was a series of just random, what if stories. That's what it was in the comics originally, and I think it should have stuck with that. Because that's the thing; it is a shame that is canceled after 3 seasons. That is a show that can be infinite, but the fact that it got canceled because they were really trying to like overarch and try to connect everything, just wasn't the go. It should have been again just something where it was a random series that had like all these different episodes about like these like different universes, and I think it would have been cool. And again, a series that can be infinite is the point that got canceled after 3 seasons is again a shame and a crime in its own way. And it's like again like the animation thing can exist, but yeah, I don't think it shouldn't be connected. And yeah, there's also allowance for like live action stuff too that's like also can be its own separate thing. Because I was thinking about this recently with like the obviously eventual reset we're gonna get after Endgame. Not Endgame, Jesus Christ, wow, my brain went backwards and after Secret Wars, holy Jesus. And I think yeah, I think my issue is that where it's like, okay, now everything's gonna be in one universe, and I kind of go into like the category where like I think there should be some separate kind of this. I'm not saying the property should be separate. I think X-Men can exist in the MCU, and Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, things like that. Blah blah blah. I think there should still be like separate like stuff outside of that that has like different stories and different like things like that. I don't know, but I agree with that. Yeah, I think they can expand upon it. I think they should expand upon it. I definitely think that'd help them a lot. I think more in the long run if they just had different stories and such. So yeah, I don't know. Not everything has to be connected, and I agree. That's kind of the situations. with that. Okay, this one's an interesting one. MCU fans make the actual Marvel look bad. I slightly agree with that. Not wholeheartedly, but I slightly agree. Here's the reason why I agree with it enough, in the sense that I will say it's stupid decisions. Like, actually, the perfect example is with Kamala Khan and having her in the MCU be hinted as an X-Men character. Sorry, my phone just popped off like twice in a row. But like have the let me see. Sorry, excuse me. I was looking at something. Oh, my phone went off and someone was texting me. So sorry. So let me think for a second. So yeah, so no, yeah, okay, so the Kamala Khan thing. So her being a mutant in the MCU. So instead they decided in the comics they were wanting to essentially make her a mutant, so they pretty much kill her off and have her reborn as a mutant. And I read like I think one comment from that run where like she was like a mutant, and I just meh. It's okay. It's not like it's badly written. It's just a why moment to me. Like it's such a why. Like why couldn't she still not have like her normal powers and stuff like that? Why did she have to be a mutant, you know, kind of a thing? Um is super weird to me. And I understand like why in general her character is made like the way she was, and that kind of thing, because they couldn't use, you know, the like mutants really in the comics for like a hot minute, so like they had to like kind of make up a new subcategory of like people with powers that aren't mutants but are like mutants. um so like I do roughly get that a little bit, but again, it just seems like kind of weird to just do the switch. It's just like I think it's one of those that's like just again it goes into like the why category. Um so I don't know. I think like things like that where like they want to make stuff from like the MCU into the main comic is where I go not really like jiving with it as well. Um with that, and I think again having MCU fans relate to that is kind of like hard, because it's like I think a lot of the time with the MCU fans, and there's nothing wrong with not being well versed in the comics, because I don't think you have to be well versed in like that kind of thing. But I feel like don't pretend that you know all every aspect of the comics if you're not reading the comics. You know, don't just assume like this character is this way in the comics and like that's the way they're written in the comics is not the way to go, because that is where again you get issues where they redo a character and it's just like why did you do that? That was unnecessary kind of a moment. So like I can see it, but I also think again, not every MCU fan is like that, and I think just assuming that the general populace for that is like not great. You know, it's just like it. Looking at like everybody, because again, I think Marvel. I will say this is a hot take myself. I think some hardcore comic book fans are like not great and make people who like the MCU not have a fun time as of late, because I think they're very like hardcore and very like again like the whole other one where it's like make or break, like if my character isn't like this and I'm mad kind of a thing, and it makes things awkward and uncomfortable. I think it makes everything awkward and uncomfortable for everyone that way. So it's like I think don't, if you're an MCU fan, don't pretend you understand the comics, and if you're a Marvel, you know, comics fan, don't make it uncomfortable for the MCU fans just because they're not into it. You know, there could be a learning curve, you know, that you can teach is the point. So you know, just vibe. I don't know, just like you don't gotta be like so, you know, kind of thing. So yeah. Anyway, okay, there's kind of two of this one. They're kind of both different in their own way, but both related to Deadpool. I generally like Deadpool, but I don't care if he never appears again in the movies. I'm not personally excited by Ryan Reynolds making snarky meta comments to the MCU characters' faces. That can be funny, but it can just be too much at times and overly indulgent. Um, he hasn't really met any of the MCU people yet with that. So I don't know. I'm assuming that like okay, that's not true because he was like with the time um authority, whatever they're called, with like Loki and stuff like that. But like in general, like he's not really to like Captain America and all that yet and things like that type of thing. Though supposedly he's supposed to meet with Thor. And there's supposed to be a whole dramatic scene with that. Who knows what that's supposed to be? If that ever will come to fruition. That's something that's supposed to be just a meta joke, um, type of thing. But I will say what my concern with Deadpool in the MCU is him being watered down to such a degree, and like I don't mind if he makes brief cameos. I think he's just one of those characters who like needs brief cameos, but like let him have his own stories in the universe that doesn't really interact with much of the characters as much. That's at least my take with it. Like I think he can exist. It's just like my worry is like him being watered down. He was able to have like they were able to have like the third movie be, you know, R rated and stuff like that, but it's like I feel like that was very much of an exception there. I don't think it's gonna be continuous type of a thing. I mean like if he like does appear in like someone else's like movie or show or something, it's like definitely he's gonna be watered down of a character, and that's something where it's like, not really as interesting. And it's like I feel like if he's gonna have his own stuff, it needs to be his own stuff. Just period. It needs to be his own separate movie away from that type of stuff. That's just me, but like I don't know. I guess I kind of agree then, sort of. I think I agree to like a different way. I guess I agree with the fact that it should be separate and not like in the same room. And then someone else says like I don't find Deadpool funny, interesting or funny. Enough with the symbiotes. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's related to the comics or not, or if that's in general. But I think I will say Deadpool could definitely get annoying after a while. I think again too much consumption of that character could definitely be a lot. For sure. So I don't disagree, I guess, with it, but it's like I'm not like fully being like, yeah, I hate Deadpool as a character. It's like, eh. Like I like Deadpool, but like, yeah, definitely in smaller quantities for sure. For me, um, yeah, I don't think I can like go into like depth with that. I think older Deadpool is definitely I think much more interesting. I think he's a lot more toned down. Um, at that point. So, you know, take that what you will with my description of that. But yeah, I'm not saying modern Deadpool is bad. I'm just saying that it's like, eh. Um, ooh, this one, ooh, this is a hot take and a half. Oh my god. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. This is what we've been looking for. Okay. DCU has not made a single bad movie, not one. If someone can sit through the sludge of crap that was the DCEU and a majority of Fox's Marvel catalog and say they liked it better, I won't be able to respect it. Is any MCU movie worse than any Fantastic Four or Wonder Woman 84? Now the TV series are a different story. Whew, that is a take and a half because I have only one movie I can tell you, and every probably MCU person will fuck moan like in such agony, and that is Love and Thunder. That movie is like, was so hard to sit through. That movie was one of the movies where like because again a lot of that like around that time people were being like, oh yeah, the MCU sucks, oh I don't like the MCU, and I was like, yeah, what's wrong with the MCU? It's still okay enough. I mean, sure, it's not top tier like it used to be, but it's fine. And then that movie came out, and I was sitting through the entire movie, and I'm like, I hate this movie. I don't like this movie. This movie, I can't stand this movie. This is a terrible movie. Like, sure, you can argue between like the other movies like the DCU and like other Fox properties and stuff like that. Or hell, even the Sony stuff, you know, like let's throw them in there too because why not? You know, they're there, they exist. Um like you can argue sure MCU has like much more higher quality control than that, but like I'm not gonna sit here and pretend to be like there's no like movie that didn't upset me in the MCU more than Love and Thunder, you know? Because Love and Thunder was just a perfect example of like what happens when like executive producers and things like that like get in the way and like think this is what people want. Because my god, it really like that movie just shows that like they misunderstood the whole point about like Ragnarok in general for one, but also like the whole point about like the whole point about just like how to write like a balanced movie. Because again, Marvel movies have always like touched upon a little bit of comedy. They just always have. Even before that, I think Ragnarok obviously was the one that really like went deeper with it. But it's like I think a lot of people, like at least I'll say like executively, like mistook the point about being like, oh, this is what people want. They want just straight up comedy in the MCU. And I think that's where I think a lot of the time when you assume something because something did well, like really well, especially for like again that franchise for like Thor, like again the first movie did pretty decent, the second one was all right, and then all of a sudden you see like a big like you know surgeons of people loving Ragnarok. It's like yeah, I get people assuming something with that. You know, oh we don't like serious Thor. Serious Thor is bad. Don't have serious Thor. You know, like I see that, but also it's like the reason people liked Ragnarok wasn't just because it was a comedy, but because it was interesting storytelling and it was a very like interesting point in Thor's life where like he was getting more comfortable, I think, with hanging out with mortals and things like that. And I think also too it was one of those things where like it was a very much of like a challenge film in the sense that like challenging his beliefs again. I think it was like a full circle moment type of thing. Like I honestly believe that like I feel like it was supposed to be just a pure trilogy, just like Iron Man was, kind of a thing, and then called it a day. Because it's like it feels like kind of like the whole point was that like Thor was challenged with his belief system in the first movie, and he had to be like knocked down a peg, and that he did. And I feel like once again he kind of like got to a point where like again he got like super like kind of powerful, super kind of you know in his head and stuff like that about everything, and then he lost you know his hammer, you know, and he had to kind of realize that like he wasn't just someone with his hammer. So to have like the fourth movie him being like obsessed with his hammer, that like Jane had the hammer and things like that, and having a weird like jealous relationship with like his axe is such a weird tone shift. Like completely and 100% is the point. Like it's just such a weird tone shift, and I like it's so weird. The whole like this all of Love and Thunder was just so awkward to sit through, and having Jane like I think the worst scene, I think the one scene that like I think a lot of people will like always talk about what was like the most like hardest scene to watch because how bad it was the scene where like Jane was telling like Thor her diagnosis and her like saying that she was dying and everything, and him being just so like, oh, okay. Like so like there's nothing wrong with like having a character be in denial, but the way they had it was so just like I don't like using the word, but I'm gonna say it was cringe. It was really cringe. It was like the cringiest thing to watch, and you're like, oh my god, why? Just why? It was so just uncomfortable. So yeah, like, is someone gonna say like, oh, MCU hasn't made bad movies? That's not true. Think about Love and Thunder. Love and Thunder exists. I know we all try wiping it from our minds. Believe me, that's a very invalid thing we can do. But like, you know, and I'm like a person who like likes some other the movies that were not as great either. But like I said, yeah, no, I'm not gonna pretend that like again, like when it comes to like quality control, like yeah, they're better at having quality control. The MCU. God forbid, you're not gonna see something like Morbius. You know, at least I hope to God not like in the MCU. You know, you're not gonna see, you know, you're not gonna see like Batman v Superman with the my mom's name was Martha too, type of like you're not gonna see things like that. But like to say that there's no movies is kind of crazy to me. Like that's crazy. It's okay to like something, but also say it's bad too. There's nothing wrong with that. Just yeah. As somebody like who's been in DMC for a long time, there's nothing wrong with that. So that's yeah. So there's that. Let's see if there's anything else. I was trying to think of something that's actually a little bit like a whoa. Um. I'm trying to find something that just makes me go like whoa. So I think I want another one like that. Um. Let's see. Okay, this is an interesting one because I was thinking about this too a little bit. So another Spider-Man one. We're not. This is at the bottom of this one. Reddit. So any version of Spider-Man that does not organically make webs from their body should not be considered a Spider-Man. They're just really strong, can move on any surface, which is better described as an ant. I do not care about the different kind of web shooters that could be made if he had to create his own web fluid and all the different functions it would have, because that just makes him a knockoff version of Iron Man, and Spider-Man should just be a Spider-Man without any external technology. He is called Spider-Man, not any insect ever man. Jesus Christ, that's unhinged. That's interesting because that is a hot take. A lot of people actually going back to the Sam Raimi, to Maguire Spider-Man. It was very very controversial when like yeah they saw that like he had organic webs and not the web shitters that were very very obviously deep in like lore for Spider-Man in the comics at the time. So obviously people are not as like offended by that now, but it was such a hot like take in general of like that kind of thing in the movie for him not having web shooters. So I think that's kind of interesting to be like, oh, Spider-Man should have organic webs, because again, which again tells me that probably they really enjoyed Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and that it's one of their favorites, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. I think the whole point about the whole organic web shooters things is to show his like Peter's like really intelligent and like smart scientific side. I think is the point to show that he's like really innovative and that he is like just a great scientist in general. I think that was like I think the at least I think is the point of that. Originally, most majority of Spider-Man use web shooters, so like I think that's really interesting. I think it's I don't know how many Spider-Man in the comics actually have organic. I think probably more than the ones that are actually more spider like. I think that way. I know in the trailer for the recent Spider-Man movie that we see that he is having organic webs now. So I think that's his own thing. Um, I I don't have an opinion one way or another for it, in the sense that like I've seen both takes is the point of it, obviously adapted. I understand why both may exist. I understand again there's the concept of like, well, he's Spider-Man, he should be able to shoot, webs out of him. That's the whole point. He shouldn't have to make them, like that. So like I don't know. I don't really have like an opinion on that. Like I think as long as it makes sense, I guess it's fine. I mean, obviously it doesn't really make sense that he can shoot out of his wrists. Who knows? But I don't know. Again, I don't really have an opinion one way or another for that one. I'm not really offended by either, because again, I've seen both and they've been adapted fine, obviously with that. So like, it's to each their own for that one. I think that one is like one of those. I'm sure someone will be like a harder stance on like something else with that. Like, oh, I really think this is this one thing versus the other. So that's that. I don't know. But yeah, we'll go on to the next Reddit page. This one's a different one. This one is, what are your MCU hot takes? From lukewarm to molten, what are your hot takes about the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Sort by controversial for actual hot takes. So, for example, they have Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is better than Guardians 1. Ant-Man has one of the best final boss fights scenes in the MCU. Hawkeye is the best Disney Plus show, and people overreacted about the final baddie's characterization. Interesting points. Let's see, which one's the most controversial about that one? Those are all kind of normal. I mean, I've heard people talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 being better, and I'm one of those people who agree. I really like that movie more. I don't know why. I just do. Just period. That final boss fight. I'm assuming we're talking about the first movie. With that, that's a great boss fight. It is really fun. It is interesting them going like and like using the toys in his like daughter's room for like kind of thing is like very like fun type of thing, like of a concept. And Disney Hawkeye being the best Disney Plus show. I really like Hawkeye. That's the thing. I like the thing. I'd be biased for that type of thing. I don't know if it's like the best show. It's one of, I will say, one of the best. I think it's better to say it that way. I definitely think it's one of the better adapted things. I don't recall people being overreactive to Kingpin characterization with that. Though I could also not paying attention at the time with that because I was just more focused on other things. I don't recall people being mad about that though, but I can see it though. People being upset by it, which I mean, like, it's like okay. It was a weird, awkward reintroduction to that character into like, finally being the MCU. I feel like Daredevil did a lot better. With like actually introducing the character again. So, like, I think in a proper manner. But so that is something. That is something. This is an interesting one. I was going through this, and this one I actually want to talk about a little bit. Is nobody should speculate about what should happen in the future properties because it sets up a situation for disappointment when Marvel inevitably goes in a different direction. Along those lines, once released, shows should be judged for what it is and not for the missing content that people think should have been included. There are time constraints on every project, so there will always be story elements left unexplored. I feel like it's counterproductive to manufacture disappointment by doing these things. And I'll read like extra comments of that. That's the thing that annoys me so much about reviews. There's always they're always saying things about how it should have been, not actually critiquing what was there. And this is just more than MCU, but just pretty much all of entertainment. But yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment. I think greatly. I think a lot of the time I've noticed a lot of reviewers and stuff like that were saying like, "Oh, I'm disappointed that they didn't have this one thing, so I'm gonna put it lower," of like what I like about it, type of thing. And yeah, I think they should be as it is. And I think one of the biggest examples for that for me, I think, in general, that people like really hated but like never gave a shot at all, and then people were like, "Oh my god, this is the best thing in the world," was like Agatha. And like, sure, I was at a point in time where I was like, why make an Agatha show? What's the point about it? And then it's like, it is the thing of like, just because it's like, okay, this is like, why would you make a character like for a show type of thing? Like, I've seen this so many times, by the way. It's not even just like, it's usually the TV shows that have it like the worst, type of thing. Because I saw that for like Miss Marvel and being like, why do we care about Kamala Khan? I saw it for like, again, like Agatha and like any character that's not like mainline. People they just get so just annoyed by because it's like, why? I don't want this. And it's like, okay. Like, and to be fair, I'll admit it, I was not excited about Wonder Man at all. Because I just wasn't knowing what to expect by it. And like, it was a great show. It was such a great series. It blew me out of the water in the sense of like what I was expecting by it, it is a great series, type of thing. But yeah, like with Agatha, again, people were like disappointed and angry and didn't like it, and then all of a sudden, like, it was a great series and people were talking about it. I think the thing that also too when it comes to movies, example, again going back to like Miss Marvel, was like the Marvels. Everyone immediately like went to pounce on this movie because like it just didn't seem like something like they wanted to watch, which is fine. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it, but it's like people like thought this was gonna be like such a bad movie, and it's like, yeah, it's not gonna be like cinema, it wasn't. But it's like y'all were expecting like something so completely different. Like y'all wanted something so like, again, like cinema type of thing, where it's like literally the moment you heard that Kamala Khan was gonna be in this thing, you should have like lowered your expectations. And that's not to say like, oh, not a good character. Great character. It's just like, what do you expect? She's a kid. She's not gonna yeah, there'd be serious moments, but not like, dark moments, is the thing. It's like, I don't know what you all were expecting. Like, everyone just went to hate on that movie, like before it even came out, and it's like, guys, relax. What do you want, I mean, I think that's the thing, is like, I think it's so interesting a point I'm thinking about too. Like one of my, again, one of the greatest, I think the greatest, I think, yeah, series is WandaVision. And like the thing is, like, the creator, like, herself had to go like, chill out, guys. It's not gonna be the ending you think it's gonna be. Like, that's crazy to be having to go, you're gonna be disappointed, like, before it even comes out. Like, that's if that's not a sign that like, people really like over like hype things sometimes, or like expectations are like too high, or like they speculate something that just doesn't seem realistic. Like, yeah, like the fact that they have to go, relax, chill. It's like crazy to me. And it's like, I think that's just in general for like a lot of, like, I will say, when it comes to MCU, is people like put like so much high expectation. And a lot of the time, 9 times out of 10, it's the big comic book fans that do it. And it's, not exactly great, because it's like 9 times out of 10, if it doesn't happen, they're disappointed and upset. And it's like, why did you think this one specific thing was gonna happen? Like, okay, why? It's very strange. I'm a person who doesn't like speculating hard about it, because it's one of those things, like, the moment you start speculating hard again, you're gonna be disappointed, type of thing, type of situation. It's like what MJ said in the MCU. It's in Spider-Man's, series, is like, keep your expectations low and you'll never be disappointed. So, yeah, you don't need to, you can speculate, just don't over speculate things that just don't make sense, you know, type of a thing. Okay, this one's actually an interesting one I'm actually curious about. Okay, there's no good way to bring in the X-Men / mutants that is both true to the themes of those comics and makes sense. The MCU has already set up Avengers as, okay, this is 4 years ago, by the way. I'm releasing this one comment, so we'll see. But it's a little different. Has already set up the Avengers as globally renowned celebrities who people adore. X-Men is predicted on the idea that these different folks are widely discriminated against, the point hunter-killer robots are deployed against them. This seems unreconcilable, and for the most part, even the comics acknowledge that this by keeping the X books largely separate from the rest of the 616 universe, except for big crossovers and Wolverine appearing and everything. Interesting point. Obviously that was 4 years ago, so a lot of things have changed with that. Obviously there was not an announcement much of Doomsday, I think, and things like that yet. But I do agree, I think, a little bit, and again, that's one of the things I am a little bit nervous about, because clearly they want to do a mutant saga, I think, next, at least some capacity. And I really love the X-Men a lot. They're one of my favorite groups, type of thing, more than the Avengers. I love X-Men so much. But they are such a weirdly unique group. Obviously, once the reset happens, they are gonna probably do a little bit of difference, and obviously have the X-Men more established, and I think in the universe in general. But like, they're already making steps toward it anyway. But like, the X-Men are so unique, I think, too, and I think that's just the, again, like, they are like 100%, I think, correct on the fact of like, yeah, like, even in the comics, they're very like separated from a lot of stuff. Um, which is I think the whole point in a way. But I don't know. My more concern about the MCU doing it is that like it's not even just the adapting part of it. I think more of the concern is like do they do they like I guess understand the characters enough in the sense that like could they like really be able to do it? Because again, Wolverine obviously is like one of the biggest examples for this, and obviously the one that's going to be judged the most harshly. And it's gonna like suck when they have to recast Hugh Jackman, because that's ultimately what they're gonna do anyway. And that's gonna be really tough in general with that. Like Hugh Jackman is such a hard role to really able to like go into for like the next version of Wolverine, because like you really set like a lot of the standards for it. So yeah, it's definitely gonna be interesting. I don't know if it's impossible, but it's definitely gonna be one of those things where like there's gonna be a lot more to it than just like I think it's just like a simple thing. Uh Kind of a thing. So, ooh, this is a long one. So, don't skip over that one because it's a little long. But maybe like next time I'll do it. So, yeah. What is this? Okay, like what? Okay, I'm about to read this just because it's hilarious and made me laugh and crack up. The MCU should be hornier, at least for some of its content. I mean, okay. I, bro, you couldn't handle Jesus, Matt Murdock and his like Daredevils walking down the street after he was having sex with um She-Hulk. Y'all couldn't handle that. So why are you telling me you want hardier? I'm kidding with that. But also, Jesus Christ. No, I don't think it needs to be. I mean, I don't think so. I don't know. Why? I mean, this obviously is a joke post, clearly, but it's also one of those things where I'm like, no, I don't think so. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we'll go back to an actual one that I've heard many a time. Actually, with this one, Spider-Man: No Way Home is only getting praised because of nostalgia. Homecoming is a much more grounded and realistic story for Peter. Not saying it doesn't deserve praise, but it's to go as far and call it Oscar-worthy is a stretch. Okay, I've heard this a lot of the time where like people kind of like have weird mixed feelings about like No Way Home, because on one hand like people are like it's an okay movie and like oh my god this is the best like Spider-Man movie of all time, and I will say it does bank on nostalgia. There's definitely no denying that it definitely banks on nostalgia in such a degree that like it's obvious, is the point. But like I will say, as like that whole set of movies goes, like I think there is something about Homecoming that does work really well, and I think the whole realism part I think is part of it. And I also think there is something about like the first like introduction to this character that like feels really interesting and fresh type of a thing. And I think I'd argue when it came to like the villain roster for this, like I think having Vulture was like a good one too, because I mean such a really like classic Spider-Man villain, like one of the early like villains that he had. So like jumping from that to like Mysterio, which is a little bit more sophisticated with that, to having like the whole Sinister Six roster was a lot. A little bit a lot was a bit much. There we go. That's the word. I was like a little bit a lot, bit much. There we go. So I don't know. I really like No Way Home. I really like Homecoming. I like the that trilogy a lot. So like I don't know. Like I don't think it's just the nostalgia that people really enjoy. I think there is something interesting in the way that they had done with the movie. It's definitely an emotional movie for sure. I think that's also I think the thing that like gets people And especially when it gets people to be like Oscar worthy, is like anytime there's like very emotional stuff in any movie, especially with the MCU, people are like Oscar worthy. My heartstrings were tugged, and it's like, okay, sure, like that was one of those things. Like I will say, and this is probably maybe a hot take, but probably not. I don't know. I don't think the MCU or like any superhero movie will ever get an Oscar, just because that is not what the Oscars want. They don't like that kind of thing, and if I am wrong, then by God, I'm wrong, and that's going to be an amazing and interesting moment, and we're going to go back to this moment in this stream where I say this, and people are going to be like, you were wrong, and I'll be like, I was wrong, but until then, that's something I'm going to wholeheartedly say and believe, that I don't think any superhero movie is ever going to get an Oscar. I'm putting that out there in general, as a generalized thing. I'm not just saying in the MCU. I'm not gonna say like DCU or whatever. Like I mean in general, superhero movies are just not something that people in the like when it comes to Oscars and stuff like that like usually like at all. So there is that. So yeah. Let's see, what are we at? We're at an hour in, and I'm starting to get tired of my voice is kind of going too when it comes to reading. So I think we'll pick like 3 more to discuss that I think are interesting, or at least worth discussing. And yeah, I will wrap it up there. This could probably have a part 2 eventually. I don't know. I definitely will say, like I said, at some point I do want to bring Gus with me to do the like a DC side of things, because he's well versed on the DC things. So that is something eventually, but we'll see. So I'm trying to think of something. I don't know. I'm trying to find some stuff. Okay. This is a good one. I think this is a good one. Not every villain needs to be sympathetic. They need to be good. William Dafoe showed us this perfectly in No Way Home. If the villain is well acted and intimidating, then they can be just as good as a sympathetic one. I love throwing in a Loki or Thanos once in a while, but making that the norm would be boring because there's no point in rooting for the heroes anymore. Now, after saying that, Ronan is one of the coolest and well-placed villains in the MCU. He is perfect for this role. Lee Pace did an amazing job, and he was one of the most intimidating villains in all of MCU. The movie didn't need a complex villain, and Ronan was a great fit. One of my favorite things in the MCU is when he puts the Power Stone into his hammer. He gets way too much hate and isn't nearly as bad as Malekith or Dreykov. Okay. Yeah, I 100% agree that like this is a me in general thing. This is like not even just like MCU, just me in general. Villains don't always have to be sympathetic. If anything, I think nowadays it just kills it to me. Like kills me as like enjoying a movie if like they try giving me a sympathetic backstory for a villain, because it's like it's so overdone. I don't care, and especially like if we're talking about a villain. The whole point is like tragic backstories. I feel like should be for like a hero side of things, or at least anti-heroes more specifically, because it's like supposed to be controversial, especially like things like Punisher or Batman or like I'm trying to think of like other like anti-heroes and stuff like that. I don't know, like Harley Quinn and stuff like that. Like anti-heroes have a tragic backstory because again they don't do things that are quite morally like normal, or at least on the scale of normal, or like correct, quote unquote. But like having like them have a tragic backstory is where you go, oh, okay, I get it a little bit. Having a villain have like a tragic backstory makes me go, well, boo-hoo. Like it really makes me roll my eyes. It's like, okay, so that's the reason that you want to be evil. That's so pathetic. If it's not good either, by the way, like if it's a good backstory where it's like really makes you like think for a moment, then sure. But like if it's just boring, then yeah, like I don't care. And Ronan actually interestingly picking for like that kind of thing for like villain, being one of the best villains and most intimidating. It's like I think it's definitely interesting. And I think also one of the things I think that's interesting about that is how like immediately Captain Marvel like ruined that, shattered the concept of that, of having like his like whole fleet be like destroyed. It's like that movie is definitely a train wreck in of itself. But like yeah, like I feel like Guardians. I mean, again, Guardians like in general as like a movie franchise, I really love a lot. Um, I'll always love the Guardians movies in general. But yeah, Ronan being the most intimidating, I can see it. He's definitely was like, I say like one of those like nice like one time villain type of things, and should have stayed like a one time villain thing. Um, being defeated and such type of thing. I'd argue though if we're gonna go like with Guardians, I feel like Ego is the most interesting to me. I will say, not the fact like intimidating standpoint, but just because he's just a pure villain. Like he does not care, like at all. Like he has like this fake sympathy that's like such a like disturbing like degree, you know, type of thing. Like the line that's still like obviously I mean again it's somewhat mean, but also it's such a like great scene in general. It's like, you know, I had to put that tumor in your mom's head, and like the Star Lord just like what, you know, kind of thing. It's such a like it's such a crazy like line though, but also like it's such a like kind of like chilling line of being like, oh my god, that's really horrific. You think about like that concept of like just that period type of thing, because it's like he like planned her death and like everything. It's so yeah, just like really disturbing. Like in some capacity, like I don't know. I'd argue that's, you know, like I'm not saying more villainous. We're not talking about who's the most villainous, but I feel like if we're talking about like at least Guardians wise, like that's I mean like pretty crazy. I mean, I could also argue I can't remember his name, but like from the third movie, it's pretty like disturbing too. Just again him experimenting on animals is horrible and terrible, and that movie really unsettled me with that as someone who's very much of an animal lover. So yeah, um, but there's that. So that is something. Uh, Okay, this is interesting. I will. This one's a good one. Civil War happened too early, and now would be the perfect time to fully do the storylines justice, with maybe even making it a Disney Plus show. That is kind of interesting of a point. I, I'm trying to. I mean, I feel like the Avengers are so separated, like and like spread out that like I feel like. I mean, I guess you could argue you could have like a new Avengers versus like the you know what do you call it? There's two new Avengers right now. I guess classic Avengers versus new Avengers, even though technically the classic Avengers aren't even classic anymore. So like I think that's where the issue kind of already goes. It's like there's no classic Avengers. You know, is the point. There's no like okay, this versus that, you know, type of thing. I think I don't know if I'd argue it was early, at least too early. I think I'd argue more like I think it could have been something that happened during like the snap period. I think that would kind of make made a little bit more sense, a little bit. But like honestly, like I think it was fine when it happened. I think it was okay. I'm not like really offended. But like I can understand why someone can see that because it feels like okay, well, you know, you have more characters now. But like I think I argue the more characters you have, the harder it is to keep track. So I think I don't know. That's just me. Uh kind of a situation. Um let's see. Oh god, I had to remember this. Some of these are 4 years ago, so I'm like, eek. Uh, there's a lot. Okay. Really, I'm trying to find. Uh, Okay. No, I'm gonna say that for a different time because I kind of that goes a little bit to like DC you a little bit, so I'm gonna kind of hold off on that one, Chief. Trying to find again. I'm trying to reform something. Okay. A lot of turtle stuff, weirdly enough. But I think again, this is 4 years ago, and I think it's when it came out. Uh, okay. This is okay. This is a nice wrap up. I mean, I already kind of talked about this, but I think it's a nice wrap up in general. So, people will eventually get bored of the MCU as a whole, and Marvel will transition to making less connected movies focusing on A-list characters. People will get bored of that too, and then Marvel will transition to making more interconnected movie. Lather, rinse, repeat. I think that's an interesting point because again, I kind of that was talked about before, but I think the way that they're talking about it is kind of what we're seeing right now a little bit. Is that yeah, they're not making much of the A list, so they're making a lot of the side characters. And yeah, a lot of the side characters are now kind of doing okay, but like they're not really doing great right now with the MCU. So what are they doing? They're gonna hit the reset button and use the main characters again. So I think that's the kind of argument point you can make about like the comics. I think too, in a way that like it's in general like you see sometimes a surgeon where like a lot of people really like the main Avenger cast characters and stuff like that in the comics, and then all of a sudden you see a surgeon of a lot of people liking the side characters in the comics. Things like Young Avengers and stuff like that come from this. I think a lot of the time, and I think the rinse repeat thing. I don't think there's something really wrong with that. I mean, sure you can argue that like that's just what happens when something continues forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever, is that like at some point in time things are gonna just repeat themselves and it's gonna be like a surgence of time where people will like this, someone will like that, and people won't like this, they won't like that, and they have to change things, and that's just going to happen. And I think in general with the superhero genre, that's just something that happens a lot. Um, and I think there's no way of really fixing that or changing that. That's just how it goes. Like I think in life, just in general, again with just any writing material, is that like things have to like kind of repeat and change a little bit. It's just obviously when it happens, who knows? It seems like this period of time with like going with the side characters are slowing down now. I think, and yeah, again, there's a reason why we're getting closer and closer to the reset button, because clearly they want to use the main Avengers again. They want to use Captain America, they want to use Iron Man and Thor, Hulk, all the classics again. And so they're like ready for it to hit the button, for it. And yeah, it's definitely gonna be. That's the thing. I think, and I admit, and this is, I don't know, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not a hot take. I've not seen a lot of people talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it as my last little section for this. Is I am scared what's going to happen when they hit reset for this, because I was thinking about this hardcore. Is what are they keeping for the general movies in general? Like, what are they gonna keep? Like, is like Chris Evans gonna be Captain America still again? Probably not. But like, then okay, what about like the Young Avengers concept? Is that gonna get scrapped completely as a whole? Like what is staying? What is gonna go? And I think that's the thing where I'm worried is like, are they gonna get rid of things that like they shouldn't get rid of? That they should try, more now that they have like the button again. Like for example, Secret Invasion. I think this is the perfect time where like after they hit the reset button, they can try again. We don't have to remember the TV show. That could have never existed ever, and type of thing. But like, how far are we going? Are we gonna go with removing like the Marvels type of thing? In that case, yeah, maybe that the how the Young Avengers were created is gonna be awkward now, kind of thing, because technically that takes place, after that, show. Are they gonna just remove Captain Marvel completely from it and just like redo the scrolls as a whole? Which they could. I mean, it wouldn't be terrible, but it's like again, like what is the plan for that? I sense and I feel that they don't have a plan. They just like or say, okay, we're gonna hit the reset button and we can do whatever we want. But it's like, okay, but like, are you gonna hit a hard reset or soft reset? Because hard reset is like fine, it will suck completely because a lot of the characters that like were made and developed and stuff like that are just gonna go, and we may or may not see them again, or at least we may not see their versions as we liked, Or if they're gonna do soft, it's like again, what are we get rid of? What are we redoing? I kind of would like to know, as like a general plan. And it seems like we've seen before that like they'll do something and not have a plan of action and then just keep going for a while, and that's kind of the main issue. is that they just go without thinking, and that doesn't help. So that's kind of where I'll leave it with that. With this stream, with that kind of thing, is the question of like, after the reset, what's gonna happen? What are we gonna do? Is there a plan? I feel like there isn't. I sense there isn't. There isn't a plan at all. I feel like they're just getting there and hoping that like once they have the reset, then they can do whatever they want again and hope that something sticks. Which it happens sometimes, but it's like again, are they gonna get rid of the wrong things or what? I don't know. But anyway, um, yeah, these are some Marvel hot takes. There's the one Reddit I was reading, uh, had a lot more stuff in it, so maybe I'll go back to it eventually. Maybe, see there's some other ones that make me raise an eyebrow or not. Or if there's something, else, you guys can recommend me, maybe a different Reddit, maybe a different post or something, or someone saying something out there. Um, Different, weird hot takes. Let me know. Also, eventually, I might probably do a DC one. Just eventually. I don't know when, but yeah, just in general DC hot takes. It doesn't have to be, the current DCU or, just the movies and stuff like that. Again, it could be comic stuff as well. I don't know how well versed I will be. Like I said, I'm hoping maybe I can get Gus with me for that one to help a little bit. Or nothing else, so these can help me do research for that a little bit. But yeah, so I'm gonna end that here. I hope you all enjoyed the stream. If you like it, like, if you dislike it, dislike it. I not 100% sure if I'm gonna be streaming this next weekend or not. We will see. Definitely will see. But I will try. I don't know what I'm gonna be doing that Saturday, but we'll see. But yeah, like I said, if you subscribe, like I said, comment below. Like I said, any suggestions for like any like MCU hot takes? What are your MCU or just Marvel hot takes? And maybe, or just comic takes in general. So yeah. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next one. So bye, guys.